Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to what looks like a studio, but if you've been watching our content, you know this is my kid's bunk room with a cheap vinyl plastic thing behind that the people at the office said, take this, so you're not showing the bunk room. Uh, I think I'm probably better off with the bunks. But hey, now that Easter's over, you've probably seen that we've shifted the conversation away from what do we do to get through this to what's going to happen after this. And nobody's got a crystal ball, but I am very fortunate to have some thoughtful friends who are smarter than me, and I can have them on to say, where are you seeing things happen? And in our work where we serve churches and nonprofits and higher education and secondary education, all in the name of Jesus, when in that work, we get to be friends with some people today. Jim Mellado, the CEO of Compassion International. Is that right? Did I say that right, Jim?
That's good.
Okay.
Actually,
Yeah,
if you want to do the real name, then you'd be into Santiago Mellado, but Jim's good for now.
well, and truth be known, I think I earned the right to say Jimmy because I ran with Jimmy in Europe several times and didn't really fully realize how stupid an idea that was till we started running and realizing Jimmy's an Olympic decathlete. What idiot goes running with an Olympic decathlete who's quietly competitive and just kicked my butt all across Germany? So welcome, Jimmy. Thanks for joining us.
That feels like 3 lifetimes ago, I assure you.
I think it was, at least.
Well, good to be with you, William.
Yeah, so we're in this sort of raw, disruptive time where everybody's trying to figure out what's next. And I was interested, we were talking before we hit record about some of the disruptions that you've seen over the years and the way that's birthed new things. And as much as you're comfortable sharing, maybe could you share a little bit of that? People might not even know your history prior to Compassion.
Yeah, no, I've led a couple ministries for the last 27 years. And in that time, it seems like I've gone through various global crises or national crises that have really molded how I view leadership today and prepare for the ones that are going to come in the future. This is not the last one, nor was it the first. And for me, I'll never forget the fright that was in everybody around Y2K. Our computers aren't going to work, planes aren't going to work, and there's a lot of undocumented code that is not, discovered, and it's going to mess everything up. Well, there was that scare, and then there was, on the heels of that, the tech bubble, and that burst, and that affected the economy and recession. And then not long after that, you saw the amazing expansion of connectivity through the internet and the total disruption to industries from, publishing to, newspapers, and all those a lot of industries were disrupted by that. And that certainly affected us. We had a significant publishing effort going, and that put the whole thing upside down. Training, how training was going to be done and distributed. So, that was a lot of disruption. And then not long after, then you had Y2K. I'm sorry, after Y2K, then you had 9/11. And 9/11 really sent shockwaves of fear throughout the United States. The global war on terror then expanded. And I'll never forget when everything was shut down in the United States in terms of air travel. Everybody was grounded. And the ministry I was leading at the time, the Willow Creek Association, the vast majority of the ministry we provided was conferences, training, and having people fly into Chicago for events. And we realized, well, what if they don't get on planes and fly here? What are we going to do? And we were doing the Global Leadership Summit at that time. And we thought, man, people could skip a year, but if 30–40% of everybody skips the training in a year, we disappear. So in 14 months, myself and other leaders got on planes, and we went to 84 cities and cast a vision for the potential of distributing the Global Leadership Summit via satellite. Now, you got to remember, back then, nobody was streaming things. Streaming wasn't quality enough. The bandwidth wasn't there to deliver quality. So we satellited the summit, and we had been doing it a few years earlier, but 9/11 really accelerated our commitment to a distributed model of the Global Leadership Summit. And but you imagine how crazy that sounded at the time. We were meeting with groups of pastors and leaders in all these cities, casting vision for them to encourage their congregation to come for 2.5 days, sit in front of a screen, go to the church they go to for free every week. Oh, and by the way, we're going to charge for the event. I mean, nobody was doing that at the time. It sounded crazy, but it worked. And we found that there was an audience for a local experience and also an audience for the distributed experience. And the Global Leadership Summit took off, and now hundreds of thousands gather annually at the Global Leadership Summit. But it was really, that innovation was accelerated by the crisis of 9/11. And I think that's the case every time we go through crisis, that there will be some things that create unbelievable pain and disruption, no doubt about it. But that pain, in that pain, if you let it, if you lean into it, you know, God could show you some things, not only about himself that you'll learn, but some new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things that what you didn't want nor invite come into your life. That creates a space for new thinking, for trying new things that could become a normal or the standard heading into the future. And 9/11 wasn't the last one. Then we had the financial crisis of '08, and that created, you know, the global recession in 9, 10, 11, and 12. And that was very painful. Oh my goodness, because that one created a level of economic strain that really highlighted for me that, man, this is like, when are we ever going to have a nice, comfortable, easy existence? And I just died to that thought and realized that in the future, I'm going to have to lead in a new norm that is going to be chaotic, unstable, unforgiving, unpredictable. That is the norm. So how do you thrive in an environment like that? And I must say, I got a lot of help from Jim Collins in some of his material. I believe one of them might be How the Mighty Fall, one of his books there. Yeah. And he talks about how you can, in fact, prevail even in crisis situation, even in a crisis situation or a new reality that is never going to be easy and comfortable, you know, along the way. And, you know, he actually highlighted what is really a biblical principle. You know, I look at, what did Joseph do when they knew lean times were coming? Of course, God gave him a heads up. So he was able to build margin. He was able to build reserves to handle the lean time. But that's a biblical principle. You know, the Bible says, you know, look at the ant. I mean, they take care of themselves so that when the time comes when they can't find food, they already have it stored up.
Well, so, that downturn in 07, 08, if I remember right, I don't want to overly pry, but that really shaped your thinking when you got to compassion, right? I mean, that changed your approach financially, right?
Yeah, no question. You know, and primarily around the concept of building reserves. And the power of reserves is that it buys you time in a crisis. When you're in a crisis and you don't have reserves, the crisis is the boss. And you don't want the crisis to be the boss. You want to be able to fulfill your calling and absorb the effects of the crisis, come out of the crisis even stronger. But you can't do that if you don't have time. And time gives you flexibility. Flexibility to do the things that you ought to do and continue doing for the long-term health of the ministry. That's why you need flexibility. That's why, and flexibility comes with time, and time comes with reserves. So I remember going through 08, 9, 10, 11, 12, and there were times when we were having to really get specific about when that donation would come or when that event would come. Because we, you know, there were times we wondered about even payroll. And I lived with that knot in my stomach for multiple years and said, you know, never again will I feel that. And so coming to compassion, we're certainly feeling the effects of that in our ministry. This spring, all our events were canceled. No concerts, no conferences, no Compassion Sundays. And so that for us meant 70,000 sponsorships did not happen that we thought fully would happen. And so to have built reserves over the years is just critical for us right now, and we will lean into those in such a way that we don't have to compromise and hurt the ministry in draconian ways. We can now have to deal with it, and we're still looking to tighten our belt and cost cut and do all of that to protect the reserves that we do have. But we're able to, we believe we're able at this point, we believe we can weather certainly the initial phase of this crisis situation, learn what we need to learn, and invest in where we need to invest so that we can come out of this even stronger and allow this crisis to in fact be put in God's hands, to have it, God turn that into good in our lives and in our ministry. So, that's where we're at right now. Now, honestly, the biggest pain that we're feeling now is the fact that those 70,000 kids that could have been sponsored are not going to get sponsored because of COVID-19. And because they live in the developing world, COVID-19 is now on their doorstep. Yeah. And our prayer is that it won't have the devastating effect that it's having in the developing world, that we're further ahead in terms of the spread of the virus, because they have compromised immunity systems, healthcare systems that do not have the capacity to deal with this. They're in crowded, overpopulated situations. You got 6, 7, 8, up to 10 people in a one bedroom or two, one room or 2-room shack. The concept of physical and social distancing, it's a non-starter in those settings. So that's where our concern is right now. And I'm grateful that our concern is there and not so much the financial side, because of the fact that we did have some reserves.
And I wasn't planning on the infomercial, but like, what's it cost to sponsor a kid, Jimmy?
Well, it's about $38 a month for them to sponsor a child.
Okay. And we're not going out to eat right now in the United States. So I'm guessing you got $38 a month. So it's compassion.org, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just go there. If you're watching today, unless you don't love children, if you don't love children, don't worry about it. But if you do, then go to compassion.org and pick up one of those kids. Wouldn't it be great if we could make up some of the slack there? And this was not pre-planned. This was total, I think where God's leading it. But what a good word about reserves. I remember I was a pastor back when I ran with you in Germany, and then I went into oil and gas briefly, and the CEO at the company Anadarko, which you would know, having been in Texas for a while, the CEO kind of took me under wing and mentored me a little bit, and he said, "William, do you know what the number one rule of negotiation is?" No, what, Jim? And he said, "The person with the most time wins."
Oh, that's interesting. See that?
Well, it's true, and it's true. It's true for people looking for a job right now. If you don't have reserves and you got furloughed, you don't have time. You're not going to win. And it's true for hiring too. If you laid off too many people and you're about to come back, I mean, if you don't have time, you're not going to. Person with the most time wins. So the question we were talking a little bit about this before we went to record. There was an article written by Andy Crouch, and I forget the other two guys that contributed, but it's basically navigating the blizzard or something like that. If you look up Andy Crouch depressing articles, you'll find it in Google. It is basically there's a great metaphor which preachers like me appreciate. Is this winter with a blizzard? Is it a blizzard, or is it a really hard winter? Or is it a mini ice age? And I think that's what, as a leader, that's what I'm really struggling with right now. Where is it? I think we all know it's not just a blizzard, right? This is here for a little bit longer, but like, we're built, we can withstand a blizzard, reserves and all that. We can do a long, hard winter and be okay. We have to make some cost cutting and to make that work. But ice age, that's a whole different thing. What are you guys doing? Is that a question you guys are asking? And how are you navigating that? And what advice would you give to leaders in nonprofits right now that are faced with similar dilemmas?
Yeah, I saw that article as well. Andy's a great friend. I love every time he writes something, I read it.
Yeah, just don't read it right before bed.
Yeah, you won't sleep.
I made that mistake.
No, we passed that article around to our leadership teams, and it was very, very insightful. And one of the most important things a leader needs to do in any crisis is to understand at what level is this crisis? You know, is it, and I remember meeting in, after 9/11 and thinking, is this like Pearl Harbor? I mean, at what level is this crisis at? And you got to understand and exegete that crisis so that you can properly respond to it and contextualize it in your own life and in your setting. So when you think about this, like, is it a blizzard and it's going to be over in a few weeks? Probably not. You know, is it a winter? Is it now an ice age, as you mentioned, and a new reality is in place? And again, for me, after you know, the 2008 crisis, I remember resolving, saying that, you know what, I need to lead in a world that's going to continuously be volatile and unpredictable and ambiguous and a bit chaotic. So just don't freak out about that. You don't have to say, woe is me, the sky is falling. God knew this was coming. He knew that he was, that this was going to happen, and he promises to never leave us nor forsake us. He says, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So, you know, we're more than conquerors with Christ. There's no doubt about it. We don't need to freak out. We can respond the way Jesus responded when he was in the boat in the middle of the storm with his disciples. They're freaking out because they think, you know, they're going to sink. They didn't realize that they got the Son of God in their boat. And if Jesus is in your boat, you're in the safest spot on earth. So I'd like to think I'd be the kind of person and leader that isn't in denial of the storm. This boat is in trouble and we're in a storm, but I'd like to think I'd be the kind of leader that would recognize there's Jesus. He's the center of my security. I'm going to go lay down right next to him and be at peace and do what I need to do. So, no need to freak out, but you have to understand you're in a new reality, and that reality may never go away. That might be the new norm. And living in the hope that it's going to keep going back to the way it was is not helpful at all. So lean into the reality of today and understand God's equipped you and will be with you to have the right kind of insight and the right kind of problem-solving abilities as you get teams around you to be able to not only just weather and survive the crisis, but in fact prevail through it. So, you know, from an advice point of view, to the extent that, you know, that's helpful, to me, it starts with you and your soul. Are you freaking out? Where are you centering your security? And it starts with you, because if you're not centered in Christ, your team will feel it. They'll feel your insecurity. They'll feel, you know, those fears that are getting, you know, uncontrolled in your soul. So it kind of starts with you being centered, recognizing the reality, recognizing God's given you the ability to live through any reality with him, walking with him, and then beginning to tackle the issues that are coming your way in the ministry one by one. And even in this storm, we're still building reserves. I mean, I just asked for a goal of cost savings from our entire staff, and they hit the goal in the first pass. And so even though we have reserves, you got to keep building them even in the crisis without hurting your long-term, your ability to have long-term impact in the ministry.
So are you guys preparing for winter or an ice age?
Well, to me, ice age. So if we prepare for the ice age, but again, not in draconian ways either, then if it's a winter, awesome. If it's just a blizzard, well, great. Then you've prepared for you know, worst case situation. Now at the same time, we're not saying, you know, the sky is falling and you know, let's lay off a bunch of staff and hurt our ability to have long-term ministry. So we're trying to balance that out, and we're meeting daily. We have cross-functional teams that are meeting daily. So again, we can understand how long is this going to last? What are the longer-term implications of it? What can we learn? What are new ways of doing ministry? I'll give you an example where right now you can't meet in groups, large gatherings, you know, we can't do that right now. Well, our program in the field with 2.1 million children is gatherings of 250 kids in a church every week, multiple times mostly. So we can't have those gatherings anymore. So our staff, in coordination and following all health and safety precautions, are taking the program to the kids, either through technology directly to the kids, but most don't have the ability to absorb it through technology. So our teams are going and they're delivering groceries, or they're delivering care packages on the medical side, what to do if this happens, where to go for help, those kinds of care packages, and they're delivering those. They're taking the program to the families, especially the most vulnerable ones. The ability to do that is going to create a capability that's going to become useful in any other crisis that we come to in the future. Could be a hurricane, could be an earthquake, could be a fire, could be a flood. These are normal circumstances in many of these environments, and us building the capacity to do the ministry in a new way is, that's been brought upon us by this crisis, is actually a good thing for the future. And we'll learn that one. We'll take that one away and we'll use it again in the future.
That's good.
You're going to have those examples in your setting as well. How many churches are learning how to do online churches? And, I know many small churches, thankful to Craig Rochelle and Life Church that have kind of given away their platform to allow any church to start doing online distributed gatherings as they continue to do church with online giving and all of that. Those are good things that can emerge out of a crisis like this to reach more people, in fact.
Well, I think that, the president said there's a pent up energy in the economy, and I hope he's right. But I think there's a pent up energy spiritually that's undeniable, and that there's going to be a tidal wave of when we can gather. I mean, online's great, but it's just like worship in person is an echo of heaven. Worship online is an echo of the echo. So it's not ever quite the same. So hoping the ice age melts quickly so we can all gather again. But love what you said. I was reminded when you talk about it never goes back to normal. My mother-in-law, who's a quilter, always used to tell my wife, Adrienne, Adrienne, life is just a series of knots you have to untangle, and you finish untangling one and then you get to another one, and you untangle that one and you get to another one. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you are. And now our kids, our daughter put that on her blog the other day for her teenage audience. But it's helpful to me. We're just untangling the knots. So, and so as you're in the middle of a crisis and untangling this knot, I'm guessing if I'm running a nonprofit right now, I would want to hear from you, being one of the leaders in the nonprofit world. How in the world do you approach the ask to donors during a time when unemployment's going up, the economy's uncertain? Like, what have you learned about making the ask in the right way when times are tough? Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, and we're living with it right now. The first thing that we did really flows out of an authentic heart of care and concern for these donors first, that we are more concerned about them than their money. And donors know that. They feel that. They can sense when you care more for their money than themselves. And so, we've sent and contacted, in fact, this week is filled with connecting with a lot of contributors to Compassion, and there's no ask. It's how are you doing? I know some people who are in the oil industry, and they've been pounded by the petroleum wars that are going on in the world right now, and really hit hard. Well, there's no ask there. It's care and concern, love for them. How are you doing? Is there anything we can do to serve you? Is there anything we can do to help you? Because this is a relationship, and what we're trying to do at this point is to love on our donors and sponsors. And then I will say, though, at the same time, there are some people that do want to contribute to the need. I mentioned earlier that there are 70,000 kids that were not sponsored because of COVID-19, and now COVID-19 is at their doorstep, wanting to do a lot of damage and hurt. And so there are some people that have the means and the wherewithal, even today, even in this situation, where they want to be a part of that solution. But there's no, that's not like the first thing that comes out of my mouth, for sure. It's more as I see where they are, and if God is in fact leading them to say, hey, you know what, I'd like to be a part of the solution side to the 70,000 kids that are not going to get the care that they could have gotten, had they received a sponsor. And so I've had, I was on a call yesterday for, over an hour with some folks that want to be a part of that. And they want to see how they can use their influence. These are people of influence, and they want to, professional athletes, they want to see how they can leverage their influence to encourage those that can, support at $38 a month, and get behind it. In fact, these are football professional athletes, and they mentioned that the average size stadium in the United States for football is in fact around 70,000. And so they said, we fill, we got over 500 stadiums that we fill, we fill stadiums 500 times every NFL season. Can we fill one and care for 70,000 kids that didn't get sponsored because of COVID-19, and now COVID-19's at their doorstep? Let's see if we can't stand in the gap and really use whatever influence we have with those that can to be a part of that solution. Because here's another thing. This is a really important thing in a crisis. One of the healthiest things that I have learned from people like Henry Cloud, clinical psychologist, is in a crisis, one of the most important things you can do for your own psychological, emotional, and spiritual health is in fact to become other-centered, is in fact to serve other people, to give and meet the needs of other people in that crisis. Like, now you do it to serve them for sure, but there is a personal benefit to your emotional stability and your emotional health in walking through a crisis, because it gets the focus off of you and how bad it is, and it focuses on other people and how you can be a part of a solution set to help other people that are in a worse situation than even you're in.
There are very few times that my New Testament Greek comes in handy, but this is one of them. The old word in the Greek for work is actually therapy.
Oh, wow.
So serving others
so
is therapeutic. Cool. So, yeah.
I'll put that one away.
Huh. When you're looking for when you're looking for team members and you're thinking about how this is going to be different going forward than it is now, has it changed the kind of person you're going to be looking for as you hire, whether it's a field rep or,
yeah,
like in higher education, it's going to be a whole new deal for presidents of universities. For pastors, you're going to have to be digitally native and still able to take care of people. Like, what do you foresee as different in the team members that are going to be needed in nonprofits going forward?
Yeah, and it has affected who I look for. There's a question that I now ask every time I interview a leader for a key leadership position. Of course, you want a variety of your people on, and you want certain people that are on the entrance level side of things, and you want to develop them, and they don't yet have that well of experience. That's all good and appropriate. But if you're looking at a key leadership position, here's a question I always ask. I want to know, have they been through a tussle? Have they been through a crisis? How did they deal with when they had, the situation when they were knocked down personally, or when they were knocked down in their department that they were leading, or the ministry or the organization they were leading? Do they know how to be knocked down and get back up? How do they respond to that? And so I'll often ask, what was the most difficult situation you have ever been in your life? Tell me about it, and how did you walk through that, and how has it changed you today? That's like a standard question every interview, because I want to know. And here's why that's so important, I think. When I just look at my own life, and I look at the lessons that I have learned that are the deepest, they didn't come from victories. They came from knockdowns. They came from hard times. The conviction that got seared in the hard drive of my soul, those were desert experiences. Yeah, you learn some things in victories too, so I don't want to underplay that, but I'm talking about the things that I feel the deepest conviction about, those lessons learned came from knockdowns, from defeats, not from the victory side. So, you know, when I was a kid, my parents taught us Bible verses. And as I learned the alphabet, they taught us Bible verses that started with each letter of the alphabet. So today, whenever I see a letter, I see Bible verses that are tied to those letters, you know, just pick any letter. R, remember now thy creator in the days of your youth. Or G, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And of course, he had to do a little playing around with X. That was a hard one. And that one said, how excellent is thy name in all the world.
Is there anything about Xerxes anywhere?
Yeah, right. But here's A. The one with A, I'll tell you, has been such a powerful verse. And really, if there was a life verse, that'd be it. It's A. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. I learned that as a little kid. And so every time our family or a family member, dad, mom, went through a hard time, and they went through hard times, near-death experiences and things like that, they would always come back and give testimony to the truth of that first verse that I learned. And we know that all things work together for good. So you put those things in his hands. God is an expert. He's a master at being able to turn even the worst possible things into good. It's his expertise. And he'll do that for you. He'll do it for your ministry. No doubt about it. And here's the thing about ministries. They were created for the good of others. And the essence of that need doesn't go away in a crisis. Often they're more accentuated. So now more than ever, we need our ministries, the organizations that in the United States they call 501c3s or for the social good organizations. These ministries that are fundamentally at a missional level about other people, serving other people, now more than ever in a crisis situation, here's where they're needed. And for those of us that have the means, we should in fact proactively be investing in these organizations so that they can not just eke by the crisis, that they can be strong to be able to add the value they were created, in fact, to add. And I'll tell you, when the vision of a ministry is strong and clear and compelling, they're like a resource magnet. Resources flow to vision. It starts with vision. Resources flow to the vision. So as a leader, I'd get real clear. What's the vision? Pick the right words to say it. Work at it. Because sometimes the way you describe a compelling vision can put cold water on it. So even as a leader, all of us have to get better and better and better at tying the vision so it can be understood quickly and people can be mobilized. I actually thought through the phrase I said earlier. And what's a compelling way to describe the challenge of the 70,000 kids? And I said it earlier, and I was actually sat down and thought, how could I communicate that succinctly? 70,000 kids were not sponsored because of COVID-19, and now COVID-19 is at their doorstep, wanting to wreak havoc in their lives.
Beautiful.
That wasn't just off the cuff. I thought about that because sometimes you only had 10 seconds to communicate a vision to people. That's all you got. So you got to be ready with your 10-second version, your 1-minute version, and your 10-minute version. And you're not going to get more than 10 minutes. So.
And your 140 character vision.
Right.
You fit it in a tweet. Yeah. That is so good. We've done a lot of research. We do a lot of work with nonprofits and schools, but the backbone of our work historically has been with churches. So we talk to churches about how's the giving holding up, and the churches that and I thought it would break really even. I thought it would be the churches that moved to digital giving and be doing fine, and the churches that hadn't wouldn't. It wasn't that at all. The churches that have a clear vision, that have been showing, I say every nonprofit has a profit margin, and the profit margin is life change.
Life change.
You can show life change, then you'll get investors, like no problem. The churches that are clearest on vision are seeing zero drop in giving so far. Now we're early. I mean, we got months to go, but even like sample wide from folks that we work with, something like just under 80% of the churches that we know are either at their pre-COVID giving or just slightly below it. So I think you're so right. Just spot on with, if I were a leader of a nonprofit right now, I would develop vision and get it clearer and clearer and clearer. And I would, since I'm the interview guy, I have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. You all take that interview question to the bank. That is worth it. For years, we've been interviewing around personal failure, like failure you brought on yourself, and everybody's done that. So the question is, how'd you recover, right? And we've got a filter for that. And then we've been interviewing around agility, like how are you, because I don't know about you, Jimmy, but since we ran 3 lifetimes ago, I'm not as limber as I was. You know, we naturally get less flexible every year. It's a biological fact. So how can you interview to see if someone's keeping their agility up? But I love that third component. We're going to build it in. What did you do in a crisis that you didn't do to yourself? Like it just happened and it met you at the door, and what'd you do? That's interviewing gold for anybody listening out there today. So Jimmy, thank you so much for making time for us today. I know you're busy and have a lot going on, and even have grandkids going on all around your house, right?
They are. You probably heard them, their pitter pats during.
It's what everybody's dealing with. Our internet's been a little blippy because I've got a sophomore at Baylor downstairs streaming online, and a senior at one high school streaming online, and a freshman in high school, and an 8th grader and a 4th grader all on. So we have no internet left during the workday, but appreciate you putting up with a bumpy connection and spending some time with us.
No, a blessing.
Yeah, so go to compassion.org, sponsor a kid now so the football players don't get all the credit. Let's stand up as people who are following Jesus and help take care of the ones that he said he cared about a whole lot. So thanks, Jimmy, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Take care. Appreciate you, William. Bye-bye.
You too. All right.